It is vlog 299 here at Peppermill Reno. If you missed the last vlog, I'm giving away a .999 pure silver coin that they gave me here at Peppermill to the best comment that comes in the next month. And if I read your comment at any point on the vlog, it means you're eligible for that. And the first comment that I'm reading comes from C. Witten, who says, "Bro, I just love Slick. I bet he's fun to play cards with and to be around." And let me just tell you, that is definitively a true statement. And guess what? He's here again today. So with Slick, Bugsy, Bombpot Blue, and several others, we fire up a 5-10 game on table 1 at 11 a.m. with the first hand coming when Slick limps and a man with a beard better than the lead singer of ZZ Top is in the rock. I have Ace-King in the hijack in this spot and make it 40. Both of those two guys call. So the 120 in, the flop is 7-5 deuce rainbow, and no one bets. Turn is a queen. Obviously not the worst card in a general sense to try to bet these guys off small pocket pairs, but I'm also getting called pretty wide here. So I just don't love a bluff in this spot. I check again and spike an ace on the river. And for the third time, both of these guys check it to me. I make a half pot size bet. First player folds, and Slick makes the call, creating a $240 pot, and I win against his ace-9. So, a decent start to this one, and then we get a grinder opening to 25 and the low jack 8-handed. Hijack calls. I have 6-7 of clubs in the big blind and look to steal this pot. I squeeze to 125 here, knowing I really just need to get through the original raiser. He gives it about 10 seconds worth of thought, and mucks the hand. Other guy follows suit, and that bluff is successful. Pocket aces. Middle position 2, I make it 35. An obvious winning player on my left who rarely ever gives much action. 3 bets to 110. And it's back on me. My goal was to 4-bet an amount that will result in Ace-King possibly continuing on here. I didn't know that that would be any amount necessarily, but I hoped there was some small chance it could occur. So I make it 250. Thinks about it for a second, saying, it could happen, and makes the call. And with $515 in, the flop is bittersweet. Sweet because I have the nuts at the moment, bitter because I've just lost all hope of getting action from queens or jacks. But how sweet would it be if he did have ace-king here? I make an extremely small bet and get a fold immediately. Next hand would be a double board bomb pot. And in it, I got my first real 6-string. Bought it at the 5 and dime. And with 225 in, I flop 2 pair on the top board and a flush draw on the bottom. Check to me, and I bet 100 in middle position 2. Same player as in the previous hand gives me action from the low jack, and the player in the under the gun +1 spot comes along as well. So with 525 in, I don't improve on either turn card, and it's checked to me a second time, and this is now getting a little dicier. But that said, I'm still going to bet. I'm making 150. And unfortunately, the player I was hoping would call folds, and the player I was hoping would fold calls, as tends to happen in these games. So with $825 in, my 2 pair gets counterfeited on top, and my flush draw bricks on the bottom, though I do hit a pair. I check, and he makes a huge bet. The likelihood of me being able to bluff catch with a pair of 5s in this spot, while not impossible, is obviously something I cannot do. Aces and 10s on the other board, almost certainly not good either. So it went from a spot where I really thought I was going to have a chance to scoop to a spot where I am going to lose both boards. However, in the next double board bomb pot, 30 minutes later, I would look down at game 5, baby.
The silver trophy to the Golden Knights.
I wouldn't hit anything on one of the 2 boards with that hand, but I would flop 2 pair on the other, and take the pot down with a $100 turn bet. This is a mid-session update. I recently watched the O.J. Simpson documentary that just came out on Netflix. I've always been fascinated by that case ever since my dad and I watched the Bronco chase on that Friday afternoon back in '94. And I am a sucker for a great soundbite, if you can get them. It is what I do for work after all. And I must say, the soundbite on that documentary of O.J. Simpson's agent describing the conversation that he had with O.J. after he was acquitted where he says that OJ said if she hadn't come to the door with a knife, she'd still be alive today, is one of the greatest sound bites I've ever heard captured. And I just really hope that that story is indeed true. I look over to see Slick winning a big pot, busting a player when he held Jack 3. You know, as one does. We'd get a $25 straddle from Slick MP2 and a call from 2 other players. I have Jack 9 of diamonds and figure I would try another squeeze, making it 150 from the hijack.
150? 150.
Okay, I just can't wait to raise your wet ass.
The button is the dictionary definition of a grinder, and one that rarely ever gives me any action. I guess those two things are kind of redundant. Anyway, he finds a 4-bet here to $425, and it folds back to me, and obviously I am sick. He then mentions, after I muck my cards, how he should have just called to try to keep one of the other players in the hand, which is a tactic that I try on occasion in spots like that as well, but obviously it's one that can often backfire on you. I'd get a FaceTime call from Anna, who's not in town this week. She is on a group tour halfway across the world in the country of Morocco. Now, I have imposed a limit of 2 international trips a year due to not wanting to be away from my son for any more than that. So she is on this one without me. And by the way, when she left to go to Morocco, I made a comment saying, "Here's looking at you, kid." Over the course of the next 2 hours, things would, just like they did at this point last week, turn to crap on me, including a hand against the guy that I had just lost that hand with the Jack 9 with, who appears to be a full-time poker player now, but the game that you really don't want to play him in is chess, apparently. And by the way, not that he was doing it here, I don't think, but if you ever see someone playing chess on their phone while sitting in a poker game, that might as well be a massive billboard saying, "Please don't give me any action." Anyway, MP1 limps, and I pick up King Jack of clubs in the hijack and raise to 30. As you can see, the aforementioned player calls me on the button. The under the gun straddle and MP1 both complete as well. So with 120 in the pot, the flop comes out ace queen 3 with a couple of hearts, and it gets checked to me. If there had been 1 club on this board, I would have considered this, but with just a gut shot here against 3 players, I am not going to bluff. So I check it back, as does the button, and the turn rolls off the 10 of hearts. So I make Broadway, and it gets checked to me again. I'm obviously going to bet I make it 60. And to my astonishment, all 3 of these guys call. And partially due to the position that he has and partially due to the way that he plays, the button is the guy that I am by far the most worried about. But that said, I still felt pretty good about my chances of winning the pot if I could get a brick on the river, and sure enough, I do get one. First 2 players check. And with 360 in the pot, it's up to me to make a value bet, and I put in 165. Player on the button, as I was really hoping he wouldn't do, slides in $450. There had been a small part of me that had been worried that he was slow playing the turn, but when I thought about it, if it was me in his same position, I probably would have done the same thing if I had a really big flush in that spot, so I can't criticize the play. I was just hoping it wasn't happening here. But he would make that raise, the other players would go out, and I would throw my hand away as well. I said I was sick on the other fold I had to make to him. This time, I wanted to vomit. I would then add on a hockey puck, which ended up being the single most impactful decision I would make on the entire day. And that's because we get an under the gun open to 30. Folds to me in the hijack with pocket kings. And I 3-bet, obviously wanting to get action, to $110. Original Razor is a well-known, very aggressive opponent, and he makes the call as expected. And with 235 in the pot, the board comes out 4-5-8 with 2 hearts, and he checks. With my overpair, I bet 125 here, and it's clear that he's not folding. In fact, he check raises to 475 here. Now, it's important to note, this player had just gone all in for about $500 into a pot of $15 just a minute ago. So he was looking to find spots to shove. Now, the idea of folding pocket kings here is an idea that I hate. It's not out of the question, though. but it's an idea that I really don't like, considering they are almost certainly the best hand right now. Spoiler alert, they were. But he's not just going to pick this spot to run some random bluff. He has to have at least a big draw in this spot. So my thought process was, let me get a clean turn card. And then let's get the rest of the money in. Because after I were to call the 475, there would then be effective stacks of $725 left. So that's what I do. And with 1,185 in, the turn is an offsuit 4. That card seems to me like one of the absolute best cards in the deck. Because now if he had 8-5, which is certainly a hand he would want to check raise, I can now beat that. If he has a hand like pocket queens or pocket jacks and is hoping they're good, obviously I still have those beat. And if he has a draw, he has not gotten there. As expected, he puts in his last $725. The thing I am most confident about here is that he does not have a full house. Virtually no poker player that had a full house in this spot would want to risk losing their opponent when that opponent is drawing the 2 outs. Everyone likes to say, oh, I do that with a full house. I don't buy it. So I can pretty much rule that out. I actually didn't discount the fact that he could be slow playing pocket aces pre-flop in this spot, but that seemed unlikely as well. So ruling out those two things, this is just a call you got to make against a very aggressive opponent. So I put in the chips, creating a $2,635 pot. My read was flush draw. He did indeed have a flush draw, but I never once thought about the one that he had. Ace 4 of hearts for trip 4s. And the card that I thought was great for me ends up being one of the single most brutal turn cards that has ever come from me in a decade and a half of playing poker. And I would lose just about all of my chips in the process, as I would rack up the $180 or so that I had left, booking the loss. All right, about a 7-hour session in the books, booking an $1,817 loss after one of the most brutal turn cards that has ever been dealt to me in my career. We'd already established the fact that he wasn't getting paid on a heart, but the 4, the absolute gin card for him in that spot. So what has already been the worst start to a year I've ever had has only gotten that much worse. I pretty much had said that I was going to play shorter sessions to myself. But in this case, I'm like, well, just haven't had enough good stuff to make a vlog out of yet, so I got to stay. And that is my reward. But the rest of the sessions I play the next couple weeks that I'm not vlogging, I predict will be very short, as I try to chip away at this deficit. All right, I'm recording this section of the vlog 3 days after the first section, and I'll touch on the state of poker for me in 2025 in just a moment after we update you on what we started last week. Got a vlog giveaway going on, giving away a coin from the Peppermill, 99.9% pure silver. And I'm giving it to the best question or comment that comes in over the course of about the next month, maybe a little over that, here on this channel. You must be subscribed to this channel and following me on Instagram at bendeach to be eligible to win that prize. And if your comment gets read at any point over the course of the next month, that means that you're eligible. We had a very nice comment from loyal vlog viewer Brian Douglas come in on this channel. We had B Sweet Videos make kind of a Fall Out Boy parody, which I very much appreciated, from one of the great Fall Out Boy songs that exists, Sugar We're Going Down. And then we had a couple worth talking about. The Tunin Demas writes in, who is the most intimidating player that you play with on a regular basis at the Peppermill? And that's actually a really interesting question. There's several different guys I could point to if I wanted to actually name a specific person, but I'm going to answer that question in generalities. And most of you know exactly where I'm going to go with this, but some of you that are more casual players might not even think about this kind of thing. But the most intimidating poker player is always the guy who has made poker his entire life. He has no other source of income. He doesn't have any kids. Probably lives in a one-bedroom apartment by himself. You'll see him in the poker games grinding chess on his phone or something like that. That is the guy that you don't want any part of. It's funny, it's like the polar opposite of who's the last guy you'd want to fight. Often the easiest guy to beat in an actual fight would be the hardest guy to beat in a poker game. Thankfully for me, I don't have to deal with very many of those kind of guys, but I've certainly seen several of them over the years, and it makes sense that they'd be very tough to beat. Think about all the time that you have devoted to your job and getting better at your job over the past decade. Well, these guys that I'm talking about have devoted all of that time to playing and getting better at poker, something that I would think eventually would get boring, by the way. I've always appreciated the fact that keeping my extra job and doing this and spending time with my son and my girlfriend and all those things makes me appreciate the time I have available to play poker all that much more. But if you just have 24 hours a day, 7 days a week available, and that's like the only thing you do, I gotta believe it would get pretty boring. But I can't really comment on that very well because I've never actually tried that apart from that 3-month period of time back in early 2015 when I was between jobs. Ben S956 writes in, from one Ben to another, how do you manage poker emotion with other life events? Whether it be positive or negative, a bad day at the table, but a good day at home can be tricky. Would love to hear your thoughts. And I think, Ben, that is a very appropriate question to ask right now, because you've caught me at a time where poker could not possibly be more miserable. On the flip side, for me, things in my actual life are going great. I have an amazing girlfriend and an amazing son, hoping to get out of this condo into an actual house here in the next couple of months. So very much looking forward to that. And some of you are going to relate to this, and some of you are going to hate me for saying this. But it is amazing how when you run really good in life, you often run really bad in poker and vice versa. I know that that's not actually a thing, but it's amazing how often it's actually been a thing. When I think back on the year 2021, it's certainly not going to be one of the most memorable life years for me for a variety of reasons, but it was definitively the year that I ran the best at poker. The biggest factor being the quality of the games that year. Haven't run nearly as good in 2023, 2024, and certainly 2025, but what can I say? Things otherwise, I think, have been great. And that, I think, is the answer to the question in and of itself, is that you try to focus on the positives when you have them. But the one thing that I like to think that I've always been good at is just completely disregarding how many paychecks I may be down in a given period of time. And the feeling of when you go to work, oh, great, I'm going to make back 10% of what I just lost in the previous 2 hours. That stuff's never really bothered me because I just know eventually I'm going to get it all back. And that's really the best way that I can advise you to handle that, to answer that particular question, which is what I hope this answer has done. As far as the downswing is concerned, this week, we played the session on Tuesday, which is what you just watched. And obviously that did not go well at all, even though I think I can take some small solace out of the fact that I got a guy who I consider a really good player to call a 3-bet out of position with ace-4 against me. I always think that I am the man who gets way more action than he deserves, because the people who pay really close attention know that I'm a pretty tight player. But for some reason, I still get crazy action in spots like that, which over the long term has benefited me greatly, but over the short term in 2025 has got my ass kicked. So what can I tell you? As far as the actual week itself is concerned, though, I had the session on Tuesday. I played 3 other sessions, or at least I showed up 3 other times. One extremely small loss, a little over $100. I doubled up Mr. W on the first hand of the day, and that didn't help. One loss of a little under $1,000, which was just an insane session in terms of people flopping big hands on my overpairs every single time I had them and things of that matter. And then the third session, I did not lose. That's right. I did not lose. I just waited around for 3 hours and couldn't get in the game, and then I had to go pick up my son and take him to swim class. But it's better than losing. So down about $5,000 for 2025 to this point. To say it's not the start I had envisioned for the year is an understatement, but if there's one thing I can say, it's that I will win that money back sooner rather than later because on every downswing I've ever been on, I always fucking have.